Yeah, I just noticed that my name in Google Suite is very long and duplicated. I have to fix that. Um, so, so yeah, I have the first point. Actually, this transition from last year, and yeah, I want to preface this by saying that I don't think like this is complaining or pointing fingers at a specific person, but I just want to talk more with everyone on the call how we can plan better, how we can have more predictability, more ownership by everyone on the team, and yeah, trying to reduce the risk and the amount of rework that happens during milestones. And we started talking a little bit about that in the last weekly sync in December. And I added some examples there of issues that I could remember where they either slipped or we realized that we needed to significantly change the design that we were thinking, or maybe the rework that we had to do during the milestone actually caused us to make decisions on top of our knees, and it didn't work out as well as it could have worked if we had done some exploration. Yeah, I wrote a lot in this point, and so yeah, I think overall one thing that could potentially help with this is making technical research and evaluations part of engineers' work. And because my feeling, and again, I don't want to sound unfair, and then of course this is a generalization, um, and um, and Michelle below, I'll hand it off to you, Michelle, but you already mentioned that this is something that we're already doing, and it's difficult for us to do that if we don't have good planning or um, predictability about what we're going to do. But today I just feel that our engineers are given issues to work in a milestone. They only look at them, and again, I'm speaking very generically. They look at them on the first day of the milestone, and then the counter starts and go. You need to work through all of these issues that are assigned to you, and when that milestone finishes, the same thing happens, and the same thing happens milestone over milestone. And I think this very big focus on output, engineering output, and the number of merge requests and all of that has been putting a lot of pressure on making sure that planning is perfect and that designs are perfect and then the scope is perfect and that requirements are perfect, or else like we only look at issues inside of the milestone and they can blow up, which is what happens. Yeah, I think I more or less covered the main points of what I had. I'll stop here so that others can comment. I see, Michelle, you commented on my part, the part that I suggested making more time and then like making the research and evaluations actually part of engineers' work and dedicating, I don't know, like 10, 20% of their time just to do that, for example. Yeah, so go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, don't feel bad, Pedro. We all feel it. We're all aware. I think that maybe one of the problems is that we haven't like combined forces. Because Andre, I think that you do some things too.
Yeah,
Um,
we do different.
so we already have been doing this for a while, but it's not as successful as you would think, and that is probably because we're us as counterparts are not really aligned. It's more like a back end effort. So when we investigate issues in advance, we don't always know if those issues are actually going to get scheduled, or you know, a lot of the times what we see is like the direction items will get missed, but the technical ones are shipped. And that's because those are the ones that I have brought to planning, that I knew that I was going to bring to planning, that I had them investigate in advance. Or what we see as well, especially this last release because of the holidays, and I think the one before that because of the team split, is they don't have time. So they get 2 weeks before the milestone starts to investigate these issues. Even before that, with Daniel, you know, either him or I would be running behind and late, and so their investigation time would just shrink. And I think you described it really well. It does feel like, okay, it's the first day of the milestone, go. And then at the end of the milestone, it's like slip, 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 slip. Um, so when we do this, I think it could be way more successful. There's a lot of different things that we could focus on, planning in advance, all of us, maybe kickoff calls for direction items, dedicating a percentage of time, I think is a great idea as well. So yeah, I'm open to discussing that.
Yeah, I'll add my perspective because we're the ones lagging behind a little bit on this. So historically, the scoring, you're absolutely right, Peter, and I'm with Michelle. Please don't apologize. We all want to make things better. And historically, we have pinged ICs on some cases that we feel like it's useful to have that feedback, but it's very informal and ad hoc. So we have also been feeling the lack of deeper planning before assignment from our perspective as well, because we also feel it like we don't like having things slip. And I think the bigger one of the things we have identified is exactly that lack of involvement of ICs. Thomas is on the call. We've talked about this as well. One of the things that we also identified is that we have at times uncovered deep unknowns on how the app is working. So from our side on the front end, we have nominated, what do you call it, domain experts for the front end of merge requests. But I don't think we have domain experts on the back end, do we, Michelle, for merge requests themselves? I took a look and it doesn't look like we do. Because one of the problems that came up recently was we needed to have a reliable ID for Blob, and we went through several backend until we got the proper answer. So not knowing exactly who to go to for these questions kind of delays a little bit, but that's just part of the topic. The other part that we can totally start doing right from the next milestone is involving ICs on weighing and planning, and they might be separate or they might be together. So having the score and having the plan could be the same effort by the same person, or they could be separate. You do it on the same, right? The person who's investigating before sets the weights, right, Michelle?
Yes, they
Okay.
formally investigate what a potential solution might be and what the weight effort would be
Okay.
to accomplish it. Yeah.
Yeah, in most cases, I think that would be easy enough. What I worry is if it's something that we don't really have a clear direction on how to build, we're going to need UX feedback. And I'm a big fan of collaboration personally, of like, I don't feel that something needs to have a high fidelity mock-up to be ready for development. It can be decided on the fly with it if it's a simple enough feature. If it's more complex, then we need some sort of hint of the direction where to go to even score it. So I don't know. I don't know how we can solve that without becoming super staggered, like one milestone for design, one milestone for engineering. But as long as everybody's always on the same boat, like if you have a spike on one milestone to prepare the concept for the next milestone, then everybody's aligned. So that could be a way to do for the deeper, more complex tasks. But I'm up for trying it right away from 13.9 onwards, involving ICs.
Yeah, I wanted to, I think I skipped over that part. I wanted to clarify. Yeah, it's under 1A41. yeah, I think these technical research, I think it's what you said, Andre, that we don't need to have a design for that at all. Because for me, it's more about, of course, it's important to know if like this specific thing is going to work, but generally speaking, what I would like to understand is just the playing field. Like what can we do today, what we can't do today.
Right.
Like for
what's
example,
possible.
Yeah, what's possible, because like a great example of that is the assignee or reviewer filter, that we had planned the reviewer feature as if this last bit that was actually really important to get right, we just thought, hey, this is probably going to work. Because the only thing we had done was ask David or someone else from the backend, hey, do you think this can work? They're like, yeah, I think so. Like there was nothing that would say that it wouldn't work. And David actually progressed through that path, and we only learned about it when it was in production. But I don't know, maybe if we had known the boundaries and the playing fields when we started breaking down the work for reviewers, it would be much easier to know where we need to go first, what we needed to explore more or less. So I think it's just perhaps at the epic level, define the boundaries of what we can do in the short term, what needs more work in the mid and long term, so that the designs themselves, and again, this is a very collaborative activity where anyone can suggest things that we can do to improve the user experience, but the designs would then kind of flow and inside of that playing field, and working with all of those constraints that are real constraints. I mean, the technical constraints are the things that we can't really avoid. So I just wanted to clarify that if it wasn't clear enough.
That would be valuable feedback on the reviewer's retrospective, Pedro.
Okay, yeah, I'll add that. Thanks for the reminder.
Out of curiosity, for like the processes that exist today where engineers, at least on the back end, do weight things, is that a solo effort, or do other engineers ever talk with other engineers?
Andre may have a different answer, but probably not. The engineers investigate the issue and collaborate with others during that. So like even earlier, if when we were talking about the design mockups and things like that, if an engineer is looking at the issue and they're like, I really am not clear what the proposal on this is, part of their investigation includes pulling in Pedro or even tech writing or you or staff engineers and things like that. So it's like a group effort, but the DRI is one person.
Yeah, I asked, thinking that was the answer, but in the editor group, and again, I'm not saying this was perfect, one of the things that they did, at least on the back end, the front end did not for whatever reason, or hadn't gotten there yet, but the back end, the issues that were like on the table to be weighted for the week were weighted by every engineer in the group. And it was obviously a much smaller set of backend engineers, but each engineer had to give like their proposal on sort of like the number of MRs that were required and what those MRs would do and like the weight of the issue, with sort of all of those opinions. And I don't know if it helped or hurt or if it's like a waste of time, but it's something that I know we're doing right now in a few issues that are going on where we have sort of multiple backend heads looking at things because they are so complicated, that I wonder if we accelerate that to like put that in the planning stage instead, where multiple backend engineers can sort of be like, here's how I would approach this, and someone else can be like, here's how I would approach this, and then they sort of find that middle ground solution in advance versus, hey, I wrote this MR and then we scrap someone's MR later in the process or do whatever. I'm wondering if it's, on the one hand, it's inefficient, but on the other, it might it might lead us to uncover some of these other things that we're talking about more in advance.
Yeah. One question before I answer. How frequent did they do that on Editor? Do you know if it was a weekly thing, bi-weekly, or monthly?
Weekly. So the backend engineers got a stack of issues every Monday morning. They got like 4 or 5 issues every week. And they had to go through and provide how they would do it and like a wait for those. And so it was like a weekly task that they did.
Refinement, backlog refinement.
Yeah.
Okay. So my feedback is going in that direction, which is this. One thing we have to be in always aware is like, for us to have better planned issues, we have to invest more time in the planning. That just goes without saying. And it will decrease, for example, the capacity for each engineer. I've had experiences in teams that work that way, like have weekly backlog refinement exercises. I think being weekly makes it easier because the load on each week is less than if you were doing for monthly, for example. Then it would be like a full day. Because personally, I always take multiple days of refinement through issues on every month, every time we're playing a milestone. And we will refine dozens of issues that never get scheduled, right? Because we don't have capacity, they turned out to be much bigger than we expected, or they're not ready. So there's a lot of wasteful, I wouldn't like the word wasteful, but I'll use it now. Not focus on this milestone effort kind of thing. But there is value in having more people take a look at it, for sure, but then it eats more time of the whole team. So maybe we can start by imitating what backend has been doing, which is giving the task of doing the planning and scoring individually, promoting. And I think one of the things that has happened, that's why Michelle doesn't have a straight answer, is this hasn't been a very strict defined process or a recommended process. We usually just give them, or Michelle, I see you do that, where you give them the responsibility of scoring this one issue, and then it's up to them to figure out who they need to talk to. But maybe we can write in our documentation of the teams exactly what we expect of this stage of IC scoring, because now we would be in sync. We would be doing the same thing as you are doing, and we give it a try and we see what the value of, and then we might evolve into having a group exercise like you used to do in the editor, but start in an incremental step towards that direction. What do you think about that? If they see it's worthwhile.
If you are asking me what I think about that, I have linked there my handbook page. If you want to take a look at the handbook page on what the process is and kind of if it needs to be modified or anything like that, and we can just discuss it in the planning issue when we get off.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. I just wanted to say one thing really quick, Thomas, and then I'll hand it over to you. I just wanted to say that I think today we put when we're talking about iteration and learning and improving in the next iteration and learning and doing all of that, I think we're putting too much focus on the outputs and the doing, and not so much on the planning and preparation. And I think that even if waiting something and researching something that maybe we then realize, oh, it's not going to work, or we have to break this differently, or we have to approach this maybe 6 months from now, I think that's better than what we have today, because I think just focusing on the output and doing things without better planning reduces the team's morale, because they see things slipping. There's rework, there's a lot of other things. So I think that lost effort that you were saying there, which is real, like some things that we will research will realize that it's not going to work, or other things come up. I think it's better to do that and know exactly what we have in front of us instead of the current state. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry, Thomas.
No, that's actually an awesome point. I agree with that. Down below, I wrote something that I wrote to Darva in our skip level, just an outline of how I feel this should go. And it's actually a 3 milestone in advance process, where 3 in advance of what we're planning for, that's where we start talking about like maybe EMs talk about what can be done. And then 2 milestones in advance, engineering and design are working together to decide if we can even do what they want to do with something. Because a lot of times what I find is we get into something and it turns out that it's not even possible, and we need to like do a bunch of like work to get to where we want to be. And then 1 milestone in advance is kind of what like Michelle's talking about, where we like weight issues and we go and find out like who knows what something needs, that kind of stuff. Engineers would do that kind of stuff. We don't have to go over the whole thing, but that's the process that I was imagining when I was talking with Darva. So I think it kind of sums up a lot of the things we've been talking about. So.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think when I'm looking at new processes, I always try to look for the negative impact of it. So don't take it as a criticism. It's more like, I think for certain kind of work, this completely applies, but it comes with with less agility. Like it would take us longer to react to things. So definitely work will fit this kind of like 3 milestone rhythm. Others will be just reacting like a bug fix or just improving or iterating on a feature that will come up during the milestone. But for the next one, we shouldn't wait 3 milestones. So I think you're right. It summarizes a lot of what we're talking about, but I wouldn't make that like the rule for all work.
Yeah,
I'm going to talk about well, we're going to run out of time, but I have a point in here about the roadmap and how several people have asked about the roadmap, even though we have the direction page and the calls. But this 3 milestones in advance with the EM working with product and design is very interesting, Thomas. And I would just let you know that the backend engineer process where we wait things 2 weeks in advance started with an issue in the create stage issue tracker, where they listed the proposal, barriers, risks, pros and cons. And I will leave it at that. But that is quite interesting because at any time I should, in theory, know what's happening 3 milestones in advance. That's pretty cool.
Right. I think for now, we have clear action points to make this better or drive it into that direction. Can we move over to the next points? Pedro, you want to take yours?
Yeah, it's really quick, and I think Michelle already answered it. But in case anyone also wants to contribute, yeah, I was just wondering if there are any iteration retrospectives that we should do. Michelle shared 3 that we have open at the moment: multi-line comments, reviewers, and highlighting collapsed diffs. Yeah, any other iteration retrospectives that we should, I mean, having 3 open is already a lot, I think, but yeah, just wondering if anyone wants to contribute to this one. If not, we can move to the next point.
I think we have our hands full and we're not getting as much engagement as I think we need to take action. But if we want to know what iteration retrospectives we should do, probably all 5 that you listed above about, outdated diff. I think we should do these more often and while I don't think we should wait until we finish the work. I think we should do it while we're seeing these issues.
So a question to you, Michelle, do you think, and I agree with the lack of engagement, and I've been pushing, but the lack of a deadline kind of, you were all engineers, so we work with deadlines. Do you think having open the issue, set a deadline for a week after that, and then have a sync call? I know that we're avoiding sync calls, but I don't know, having something that would push people to participate, do we even want to have a sync call, or should we just set a deadline and have everyone contribute as synchronous?
Well, we've tried the deadline thing before with some of our closed issues, our closed iteration retrospective. So I like the sync call idea, and
we can give it a try.
I was also kind of thinking, when we assign these issues, maybe we create a placeholder iteration retrospective for it already. I don't know. So that as they're going through the issue, for example, reviewers was going super smoothly until like week 3. And at week 3, it might have been easy for somebody to just pop into another issue and say, this happened today, and then pop right back out.
Got it. Okay, let's open the issues for the new ones. and try with the deadline and potentially set something like for a sync call, culmination discussion, and we'll see what happens.
Have we
And
had any
Kai, yeah.
successful iteration retrospectives? I would, and I say this in the nicest of ways. The fact that there are 5 open leads me to believe that we haven't learned from any previous ones, which is, again, not a blame thing, but I'm wondering if like these are just not an effective tool, like in terms of trying to extract learnings. Like if maybe they're not useful to people because people don't provide the thing, or we've already sort of gotten through it and so we're beyond it, or if generally the problem is sort of what we talked about above, which is things aren't planned well enough in advance, and we would have caught these things anyways, and sort of like there's a bigger sort of like first thing we need to solve before we get into some of these. Like I guess one, are these effective? And 2, like what are you actually trying to get out of them? Like what are we trying to learn?
I can answer that because I've been thinking about it a lot all week. I don't know if they're effective or not because I don't think I think we've had 1, maybe 2. I think Andre has had 1 and I had 1 separate or something like that. And like I said, when too much time passes or we wait until the issue is resolved, look at merge refs. It's been several months. You don't remember any of that stuff. And so it turns into kind of what we have today with our regular retrospective, where it's like, yeah, this wasn't a very productive month. I don't know what it was. I'm just not feeling into things, you know. But that's not actionable, and we don't know what that means. And so I don't think we've given them a chance to see if they work or not. And what I'm trying to learn is say, you know, with reviewers, if we had known this in advance, that could have prevented something. Now we can go look for that next time. We're not getting any of that right now.
And I know we're at time, but I did capture the one that we had before. I can remember from the top of my head some learnings we took from using multiple interdependent feature flags that have been affecting our decisions, which we have. So we have corrected some of those problems. We haven't solved them all, but we some of them are in our minds. But I think the more we have them, the more it's just an iteration. We're always going to have them. I don't think having an iteration retrospective is a bad thing. It's a sign of a bad thing. It's just we constantly want to improve. But yes, we have taken a couple lessons, but sometimes we forget them. And we're at time. I wanted to call your attention for point number 4, because we're going to have a call tomorrow. If you have any questions about that topic, please reach out to me. I can clarify on a one-on-one basis, but yeah, that's it. Okay. So you're muted, Kai.
Do you have a few minutes to talk about number 4? Like anyone
Yeah.
can drop.
I have a call. I have a call right after this, but I can get 2 minutes.
But I'll find some
present
time.
it. Oh yeah.
I'll find some time with you. We'll
Schedule.
talk.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks. Bye.